So good morning once again. So we are about to go to another session, which is women in genetics. Our session will be delivered virtually also by Lavina. So yeah, she's with us virtually, and before that, any comment about the breakfast? And I'm gonna do some of the breakfast. Yeah, so yeah,
Hi there.
Emphasis. So yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Perfect.
So I'd like to also welcome Sonia to continue the moderation. But the session is about women in ethics. And I don't want to much of your time. Please, Stephanie, take the lead.
Hi, Lavina.
Hi there, how are you?
I'm good. We have to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so you can continue. I think it's okay.
Okay, great. Let me just enable screen sharing. And I'm sure everyone can see that.
Okay, let's wait for it. Okay, yeah, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for sort of making time in terms of coming to the conference and being able to, attend thus far. I think I'm particularly excited in terms of the conversation that we're going to have. You know, we have quite an opportunity in terms of the 5-year development plan that's sort of hitting us together with the possibility of 4IR and really being able to explore the applications of AI and how we can actually enhance the digitization process so far. Before I get into the sort of slides, I think I just wanted to take some time to really connect with you. We've seen obviously digitization sort of come in many different forms, and we've seen digitization in terms of rural areas or informal communities. We've seen digitization come in forms of urbanization. We've seen digitization when we have to talk about the technology end of it. We've seen digitization in terms of socioeconomic sort of fronts as well. We've kind of seen them on quite a spectrum, and we've seen the potential. And the way that I look at it is that, Africa has had the last 5 to 8 years to kind of really play around with technology. And we utilize this time frame to kind of understand what it can actually do for Africa. Having said that, we've now had our playground, and going forward, it's about the mass adoption, it's about the mass applications, and it's about the scaling up. All in the love for impact, impact as in uplifting our continent. I think we find ourselves in quite a unique position in terms of being able to, leapfrog. It's a word that's thrown around quite often, but I think we're at this point where we understand the tech, we understand where we want to go to, and now it's about the mass adoption. So with that, I think I'm just going to then go into the slides. So just give me a thumbs up if you guys can see that. Okay, cool, awesome, thank you. So, my sort of specialization, if, by ways of introduction, I'm known as the AI mom, and a lot of my work has been spread across Africa. in terms of all technologies, including, the likes of artificial intelligence, blockchain, virtual reality, augmented reality, and now Web3 / the metaverse. And it's been quite an interesting moment for me to sit as an advisor to the African Union, as well as a few other sort of entities like the NIDTA, the NASPERS, and a few other sort of regions within Nigeria, Ghana, Rwanda, in terms of tech policies. And, one interesting thing that I always come back to is, how do we rethink being human, knowing the fact of having the capacity of technology, understanding where it can go to, understanding where we want it to go to, and in particular, seeing that through the eyes of Africa, and that entire localization becomes important. So we've all seen this particular picture, where it's human behavior initially has been, it wasn't me, people throw their hands up, whether it's kids, whether it's adults, and this is the kind of sort of future picture amongst robots or AI, right? That's kind of foretold. And, again, what is the balance? Where's the humanization? And where do the actual ethical applications lie for us when we have to talk about applied AI? So most of you may or may not have heard this story before from myself in terms of, AI and what it looks like. Most of us are very familiar with the story of a genie in the bottle. It kind of cuts across many different cultural backgrounds. It cuts across many different global sort of arenas as well. And, the commonality between it is very much that a genie will grant you a wish. The second commonality is that it literally will grant it to you, not always in the way that you imagined. And there's a lot of a likeness that is drawn from this in terms of artificial intelligence. We've started creating something that we have no idea of the full potential or the full application use of it. When we talk about different areas of AI, whether it's the deep learning, the neural networks, whether it's robotics or chatbots or general AI, we kind of are in the realm of not understanding the complete picture, right? And that's probably one of the, with humanity, we always see things from a hindsight perspective. So, after a few years, after we've developed things, after we've gone through a process of research and understanding, then only we come through and actually have quite an observation view to say, yes, this was the actual pattern that we were looking for, that we kind of didn't really understand after all. So, the question is, how do we actually reframe AI, and how do we start closing the gap of applied AI? And, for me, in this particular stance, we're going to delve into, a few base areas. We've seen, obviously, industry use cases where AI has helped from a healthcare perspective. We've seen it from a law perspective. We've seen it from regulation. We've seen it, from logistics and supply. We've seen it in the agricultural industry. We've seen it, across all the different realms. So it's proven itself. It's there. It's done. It's arrived. We've managed to find use cases that kind of suit all needs. My question to everyone here is, how can we, utilize the information that we know and actually mass scale Africa, with the localized problems that we actually have? So I don't know if this is quite interactive or not, but I'll ask a question and, feel free to kind of answer. Does anyone know what the smartest AI is out there at the moment?
Yeah, so there is one answer here, Sophia the robot.
Sorry, say again.
Sophia the robot.
Okay, Sophia.
Yeah.
Okay, Any other guesses? No? No guesses, guys? Come on.
Yeah, so I think no more guesses.
Okay, okay, no more guesses. Perfect. So the smartest AI at this point in time is something that is developed by Meta. And it is I'm just going to try and get it up on the screen quickly. So it's the AlphaGo, the Google Mind, but that was the initial first one. The second one is in terms of an AI research cluster developed by Meta, which is called the supercluster. That's something that you guys may want to sort of have a look at. Let me get back to sharing the screen. Sorry, guys. There we go. So we obviously, as we said, have all these different areas, different capabilities. We understand what is the most powerful AI. We understand, where things can go wrong. We've seen what happens when we put AI together with each other that have been created independently. And these are almost recipes for disaster, right? So AI, for example, that were put together, literally develop their own language within a couple of hours. And, no one has much control over that. And the question begs is, how much of control do we actually want? How much of control is actually sufficient? And where do we actually want to take this? So that's the technological approach to it. And then there's the humanitarian approach to it, which is what are the ethical applications of AI, right? In this particular frame, and this is something that's personally important to myself, is around data privacy and how that has been adopted across the continent and where are the gaps in it. If we take, for example, we have an average age of 18.8 years across the African continent. That's a very young sort of population. Social media, for example, boasts quite a large influence in young people's lives today. And, why is it that we don't have a strong enough sort of foundational background in terms of AI when it comes to dealing with, data privacy, data surveillance, and similar sort of scenarios. So, one of the fundamentals in terms of applied AI is obviously trust. So trust in the technology, trust in the people that have built it, and equally so, trust in the ecosystem where it's being used. Now, that's quite a lot in terms of what is required when we're actually having these mass rollouts of applied AI. We have to be able to really zone in and, continuously be conscious of how we apply and to what industry it's applied. The transparency factor as well is one that is being highlighted more and more. And I think this is an opportunity where we're going to start seeing AI not alone as AI, but we're going to see the technology starting to merge. And this is the likes of the blockchain technology and artificial intelligence. I mean, leave alone the fact that we haven't mass scaled many solutions across the continent. Now we're having to deal with merged technologies. But transparency becomes equally important. We know that from a continent perspective, we sit with an opportunity of having, a rather political sort of stigma that's attached to us. We have a way of rewriting that when it comes to AI. We have a way of rewriting that when it comes to transparency and, with the likes of blockchain included. And that's just one example. Ethics is something that I kind of always put up, and that's purely from a perspective of saying, how are we, again, taking our continent and, ethically applying this? How can we then go ahead and get the most benefit? So for example, surveillance. Surveillance is something that happens quite a lot to us across the continent in many different shapes and forms, whether it is via our, smartphone devices, whether it is via our laptops, whether it's through cameras and monitoring. There's always some form of, surveillance that is happening, and to what degree. And this goes in conjunction with our data, and is our data being applied ethically within these AI applications? Is it actually being ethically sort of utilized by the larger big tech? And most of us know the answers to this, but we still allow the stuff to happen. And I'm at the point where we need to change that narrative, right? The other is obviously around privacy, which is something that I touched on. And just on the data privacy side, I mean, obviously Africa has seen quite a lot of regulation changes. 3 years ago, we had only 6 countries across Africa that really worried around data privacy. And now 3 years later, we sit with 26 countries that have mass adopted. So regulation, I think, has been playing quite a large portion to this in terms of, the mass adoption. But, again, I think we've taken the myth that Africa and regulations kind of don't work hand in hand, and we've managed to do that. How do we solve the actual problems from a perspective of, this gap that we find ourselves in? So in terms of the actual plan and the national policy and where we want to be in the next 5 years, for me, the first and foremost is around skills, and more skills. I can't stress this enough. We sit with a conundrum that we are in a position of having the youngest population. We sit with the narrative that we're going to contribute 1/3 of our working population in 8 years, right? And at the same time frame, how do we then mass scale? We already know the globe is sitting with a shortage of, whether it's computer scientists, whether it's data scientists, whether it's engineers, whether it's, people dabbling in the new sort of emerging tech, whether it's quantum computing or, the likes of augmented reality, virtual reality, and the rest. But, how are we creating enough internship programs? How are we creating enough, apprenticeship programs? How are we allowing for a lot of this intercontinental trade to kind of happen? And I understand that the whole African Free Trade Agreement is largely portioned to solving that, but that's more from a transfer of goods within the continent, right? We need something that can mass scale from a skills perspective, something that allows for a lot more innovation to happen from a university perspective, a lot more innovation and liquid upskilling to happen from a on the ground perspective. And I think recruitment as well plays a large portion. All of this can actually filter down into a schooling environment. Those schooling environments, obviously there's another conversation layer to this, which is around access to technologies, which is something, that I'll highlight a little bit in the next one, which is infrastructure. I think as much as we have a plan and we know where we're headed, skills is still a problem, infrastructure is still a problem, and these are opportunities equally so for us to be able to, kind of circumvent. Another one is access to, the digital economies that exist, the access to, a right. So access as a right to the internet, access as a right to, playing around with AI, playing around with blockchain, playing around with all these other different technologies. I think we don't allow ourselves enough of a creative space to be able to figure out the complete localization. And the last being a continent view. that continent view is around having to understand where each of us play as our 56 different countries and understand where we want to mass scale. And that's where the opportunities kind of lie for me, and that I see in terms of the applied AI use cases. As much as there's these fundamental issues that still exist, whether it be from ethical, whether it be from a technological, whether it be from, the rest of it, I think we're at the point in time where we need a lot more of the access, we need a lot more adoption, we need a lot more infrastructure still, we need a lot more of the skills that kind of need to still come through. And, again, we need almost like a continent view perspective to kind of say, this is where the gaps are, this is what we need, this is why we need them, and, kind of almost redirect it. So, I almost wish from an investment perspective, there was that perspective, redirecting investments across Africa where it's actually needed. And this is from a startup perspective that I talk. Same with regulation. I think, as much as the AU kind of holds its hat in terms of coming up with some guidelines and some guardrails, it's how do we then, direct this conversation into a more focused, intentional one. And I think that's where the applied AI is really going to get a lot of it. And these are obviously just some of the, questions and quotes that we've kind of come across in the last few years. And, intelligence is something that is important to all of us, whether that is the human intelligence or whether that's the augmented intelligence that we talk around. Creating things for the sake of creating is always fun. But again, we're playing with something that has an unseen potential, and that's where the caution needs to come in, but equally so the curiosity. And, emotions equally drive us as humans, and, the human-centered view of AI and the human sort of centric approach to applied AI is something that I would encourage over and over again, as many times as possible for the continent. And, just absolute appreciation for EMAI for putting this together and for having all of you guys on board. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lavina, for the nice keynote. So I think I'd like to hear from the participants if they have any question or inputs. I think you want to hear that.
Yeah. So any question?
Yeah, so while we are waiting questions from participants, so I wanted you to talk about the issue of inclusion, specifically on gender. So how do you see the gender inclusion issue, specifically in AI context, like AI activities and other related issues?
That's an awesome question, and thank you for that. So we always sit with a conundrum in the context of Africa that we don't have enough data sets that we own. We don't have enough, of a centralized data lake or data repository that we can pull a lot from or contribute towards. So, my sort of approach to all of these things that exist is for us to have some form of an open data set that exists somewhere that we can start continuously, pouring a lot more of our information into. And with that, obviously, we will be able to help the AIs, sort of function better. So, as much as we need to be cautious of how we create something on the AI front, and we've got to wear the hat of it being completely inclusive, completely diverse, and have the sort of approach of the equality. In the same breath, we've got to also, from a creator perspective, that's the one angle. From a support perspective, we've got to be able to create enough of these different data sets to allow ourselves to have more visibility and to be able to rectify the narrative or the bias that actually already exists within these.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is more follow-up question. As you advise like to have these open data repositories. So, for instance, in South Africa, you know, it's one of the countries which are doing best in terms of growing of AI ecosystem. So, do you have any advice on the approaches to use while creating these open data repositories?
Yeah, I think that's an awesome one as well. And I'm just trying to think, you know, what would create an effective AI ecosystem, right? One where we have almost a pool of developers, we have a pool of researchers, we have a pool of startups, right? So that's the kind of ecosystem that kind of needs to revolve around this open, you know, data, you know, sort of environment that we want to create. And with that, it comes with, you know, having some form of an understanding that we're creating it for the bigger picture. But I think also giving people incentives in terms of why they should actually be part of this becomes equally important. We know that we want to create impact across the continent. We know we want it at a mass scale. So how can we do that? You know, a lot of the time we talk about infrastructure. I think it's about 70% of the infrastructure that exists within Africa is actually not owned by Africa. And, you know, so can we not have the same narrative transferred when we have to talk about data, for example? So, you know, it's important for us to own it. It's important for us to create it. It's important for us to then let it help us understand the narrative we want in terms of the impact.
Thank you so much. So I've got two other questions. I think these are going to be the last questions. So one is how, in the context of AI, is gender inclusion and financial inclusion integrated into cybersecurity to control or reduce abuse?
Okay, can you just repeat that? So there was cyber spoken about, there's gender and financial.
Yeah, so how is the gender inclusion, financial inclusion can be integrated into security to control or reduce abuse?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? Because we've seen the financial sector really take advantage of, you know, the use cases or the applications that have hit the ground in terms of, you know, if you default on a payment, your telephone gets taken away. If you default on a payment, you know, there's extreme measures that's been sort of happening. And obviously we want to be able to stop that or be able to circumvent that. And, you know, that obviously comes in with the likes of AI. So I have seen a few AI sort of Africa companies that are really focused on providing more of an AI from a perspective of user behavior, AI from a perspective of the integrated information that is already existing there. So from an AI perspective, it doesn't have to be as intrusive as it has been from a financial or credit perspective previously. And, you know, equally so, I think, you know, rightfully mentioned, cyber plays a huge part and a huge portion in terms of where this has to lead to. You know, we're as Africa, we don't probably trust a lot in systems and we don't trust a lot in the information that we're given, right? We almost always go back and verify. We almost always go back and, you know, double check, triple check, because we want to be sure, right? And it's okay. It's absolutely okay that we do this. And I think, you know, it's going to allow for that privacy part as well as the transparency and the security aspects to kind of really start coming together and, you know, really forming the whole cyber end of it. You know, there is an increase that has been predicted globally in terms of cyber attacks. And I think, again, AI has a portion to play in terms of. and a
Thank you
positive
so much.
one.
Thank you so much. So the last one is, how is integrity in AI implemented, especially in Africa?
How is what?
Integrity.
I can't hear the word fully.
Yes. How is integrity implemented in Africa? How is AI integrity?
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, how is AI like integrated within, oh, integrity. Ah, right. Okay. Okay, awesome. So how is the integrity of AI applied across the continent? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome question. So in terms of integrity, you know, again, I think there's a few approaches. We've seen it where it goes wrong. We've seen where it goes right. So from an agricultural perspective, from a health perspective, there's a lot of different scenarios and use cases for integrity of AI itself. We've seen from, you know, a perspective of everyone trying to individually handle the integrity in AI, right? There is no sort of centralized effort at this point, whether it be from a regulatory perspective or whether it be from a body or industry body perspective that exists that handles that full integration across the continent. One of my suggestions previously has been to create an ethical board for tech across the continent. This is something that I believe would help to facilitate the integrity portion of what is actually being applied across the continent. And, you know, that's whether we're talking about shared health data, whether we're talking about the integrity of, you know, your financial information and, you know, or the integrity of sharing, you know, data between different countries in the African context as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lavina. It was so nice having you. And thank you for sharing your thoughts and what you see has to be done in terms of ethics and other things. So we appreciate.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.